Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most powerful and, honestly, one of the most misunderstood forces in all of history, the Mongol Empire. This was a force that was born on the massive wind-swept plains of East Asia, and it would go on to completely redraw the map of the world as we know it.
So, right off the bat, I've got a question for you. How long do you think the unified Mongol Empire actually held together? Just take a guess. Are we talking centuries, maybe 100 years? Okay, so if you were thinking it all just kind of fell apart right after its legendary founder, Genghis Khan, died back in 1227, well, you're not alone. That's probably one of the biggest myths about the Mongols. The real story is so much more complex and, frankly, way more fascinating.
All right, let's get into it. Because to really understand the empire, you have to understand the man who built it. And this story, it doesn't start with some mighty emperor on the throne. Nope. It starts with a young boy named Temujin, who was literally fighting just to survive.
You see, he was born into a pretty noble family, the son of a chieftain, but then his father was poisoned by a rival tribe. And just like that, his family's followers, they all deserted them. Temujin, his mom, his siblings, they were left with nothing. They had to forage and fish in the wilderness just to eat. Can you imagine? That kind of brutal hardship, it forged this unbelievable resilience, this burning ambition in him.
Now, this is what's so incredible. His genius wasn't just about winning battles. Temujin completely flipped Mongol society on its head. See, the old way was all about your bloodline, your tribe. That decided your rank. But Temujin, he threw that out. He promoted people based purely on their skill and their loyalty to him. He'd even scatter the people he conquered among his own troops, which broke all those old tribal loyalties and forged a single unified Mongol identity. It was revolutionary.
And now we get to see what this powerful new social machine could do. With all those warring tribes finally united under his command, Temujin, now proclaimed Genghis Khan, turned this new, unstoppable engine of war outwards, toward the rest of the world.
And the speed, it was just staggering. I mean, look at this timeline. In 1206, he's named the universal ruler. Less than 10 years later, he's captured the capital of the mighty Jin dynasty in China. By the early 1220s, his armies have just rolled right through Central Asia. This wasn't just a bunch of raids, this was the methodical creation of a world empire.
So you have to wonder, what was driving this relentless expansion? It wasn't just about loot. The key, the absolute core of it, was this belief in a divine mission. Genghis Khan truly believed that the sky god Tengri had given him a direct order to conquer the entire world. So you see, to resist the Mongols wasn't just to fight an army, it was to resist the will of heaven itself.
What did that divine mission lead to? Well, this. They created the single largest contiguous land empire in all of human history. It stretched from the shores of Korea all the way to Ukraine. It was so huge that it basically connected most of Eurasia under one rule, creating this continental free trade zone that made the Silk Road flourish like never before.
But an empire that's forged by one man's singular vision always faces its biggest test when he's gone. And for the Mongols, this is where the cracks started to show. Not from some outside threat, but from right inside the golden lineage, the family of Genghis Khan himself.
And this right here brings us back to that first question I asked. The empire did not collapse when Genghis Khan died in 1227. In fact, it stayed unified and kept expanding for another 33 years under his sons and grandsons. The real, permanent break, that came from a civil war.
So, what was the actual breaking point? It wasn't some rival army, it was a family feud. When the great Khan Mongke suddenly dies while campaigning in China, his two younger brothers, Kublai, who was in China, and Aryk Boke, who was back in the Mongol heartland, both declared themselves the next great Khan. The devastating civil war that followed just tore the dream of a single world empire apart, forever. But the Mongol Empire didn't just, vanish. It was more like a supernova. It exploded, and in its place, it transformed into four new, totally distinct, and incredibly powerful empires, each ruled by a different branch of Genghis Khan's family tree. And here's the breakdown. You had Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty down in China. You had the Ilkhanate in Persia, which actually became a major center for Islamic art and science. Then there was the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and of course, the Golden Horde, which would dominate Eastern Europe for centuries. Each one carved out its own unique path. So the obvious next question is, what happened to them? What brought these four mighty successor empires to an end?
Well, as it turns out, they were all plagued by a very similar set of internal problems that in the end proved fatal.
And it really started right at the top. The ruling class was literally destroying itself. In the Ilkhanate, for instance, very few rulers lived past the age of 35. We're talking rampant alcoholism, constant inbreeding that led to fertility problems, and without a clear line of heirs, every time a ruler died, it kicked off another potential civil war.
So with the ruling family in total chaos, a new power stepped into the vacuum. The powerful military elites, the generals known as the noyad. They stopped just serving the Khans and started controlling them. They'd install these puppet rulers that they could manipulate, which of course just fueled even more conflict.
And all this constant infighting wasn't just politically messy, it was bankrupting the empires. In Yuan China, for example, the court just kept printing more and more paper money to pay for its crazy spending habits. This led to runaway inflation that made their currency completely worthless. The economic engine just seized up.
And as if that perfect storm of internal decay wasn't enough, the world itself seemed to turn against them. In the 1300s, environmental catastrophes struck hard. There was a global climate shift we now call the Little Ice Age, and it triggered massive famines, floods, and droughts. This weakened society was the perfect breeding ground for disease, culminating, of course, in the Black Death, which just tore through the Mongol Khanates.
So, while the empires themselves did eventually fall apart, their impact, that didn't just go away. The century of Mongol rule left this incredible echo, a political and cultural shockwave that permanently, and I mean permanently, reshaped the world.
Their legacy is just everywhere, often in ways you wouldn't expect. They weren't just destroyers, they were unintentional nation builders. Modern Russia, for example, really began with Moscow, which rose to power by being the chief tax collector for the Golden Horde. The great Mongol Empire in India, founded by a descendant of the Chagatai Khans. Even the Great Wall of China that we all picture today was built by the Ming dynasty because they were terrified of a Mongol comeback. And their huge connected empire sped up the spread of technologies like gunpowder to the West, changing warfare forever.
Which really leaves us with this one final thought. From a penniless kid on the steppe to the largest land empire in history, a force that shattered old worlds and accidentally created new ones. Their rise was like a meteor, their fall was complex, but their legacy, well, it's undeniable.